Every loan you've taken is a Roman slave trap. Rome didn't just conquer nations, it conquered its own citizens. They called it Nexum, a promise of freedom. A farmer needed seed, a soldier needed land. The Republic smiled and handed them a contract. The ink was poison. Miss one payment, and the promise turned to prison. They called it working off your debt. You were no longer working for yourself, you were working for Rome. 2,000 years later, new language, same leash. By now, live free, build your credit, the same lie, digitized. Every paycheck, a quiet confession of ownership. You were never meant to pay it off. You were meant to obey, and I can prove it. Rome sold debt as opportunity. Nexum made it legal. 5 witnesses, bronze scales, words bound you forever. The debtor became a nexus. Ancient Romans said it meant not one's own. Your body became collateral. Your labor belonged to the creditor. Your future was forfeit. Between 495 and 287 BCE, debt crises fueled 5 mass revolts. The entire working class walked out of Rome. The Senate, filled with creditors, granted fragments of relief, never enough to break the system. This is the part they erased from history books. Senators voted for wars that devastated plebeian farms. Then they lent money to desperate veterans at rates that multiplied debt faster than farming could repay. When farmers couldn't pay, senators foreclosed. One veteran testified in 495 BCE. While he fought, enemies burned his house and destroyed his crops. He returned to face a war tax he couldn't pay. He borrowed from a patrician. Usury multiplied his debt. He surrendered his grandfather's farm, his father's farm, a third property. The creditor imprisoned him. His body showed whip marks and starvation. Here's where the system pulls the strings tight. Credit today uses identical language. Rebuild your life. Opportunity through financing. Payday loans carry 300 to 400% APR. Student debt averages $37,000 with 20-year repayment. Medical bills bankrupt 500,000 Americans annually. Freedom promised, captivity delivered. Most people still can't see this. You're ahead of them now. The 12 Tables, Rome's legal code, protected property over human life. Creditors could imprison debtors without trial, chain them, beat them. After 60 days, execute them or sell them abroad. The law said creditors could cut pieces, literal body dismemberment. Whether carried out or merely threatened, the terror was real. This wasn't dysfunction. This was the design. Unlike chattel slaves, Nexi had incentive to work harder, theoretical freedom through repayment. But the system guaranteed repayment was impossible. Any earnings went to interest first. Freedom remained forever out of reach. Payday lenders don't want you to pay off loans. 85% of borrowers take 7 or more loans per year. The median borrower stays in debt 199 days annually. Student loans can't be discharged in bankruptcy. Wages garnished, tax refunds seized, even social security checks. You're not a customer. You're a profit center extracting wealth. Here's where the scam gets deadly. Rome's military service created the perfect trap. Soldiers served at their own expense. They couldn't tend farms during planting and harvest. Enemy armies ravaged their property while they fought. Veterans returned to face tax obligations they could only pay by borrowing. The same senators who voted for wars lent money to the soldiers. In 486 BCE, Consul Spurius Cassius proposed distributing conquered land to debt-ridden plebeians. Patricians executed him and burned his house to erase his memory. Nearly a century later, Marcus Manlius Capitolinus defended debtors publicly. Patricians murdered him. The bloodline of control flows through today's banks. Who writes your financial laws? Creditors. Student loan bankruptcy protections were eliminated in 1998. Credit card rates can legally exceed 30%. Payday lending thrives in the poorest neighborhoods. This is a mirror, not history. In 326 BCE, young Gaius Publilius became a nexus to pay his father's debt. His creditor attempted to sexually assault him. When Publilius refused, the creditor had him stripped and flogged. Publilius fled into the streets, his lacerated body visible to all citizens. Public outrage exploded. The Senate passed the Lex Poetalia Pauperia. Nexum was abolished. All existing nexi were freed. Future debt could attach only to property, not persons. But the victory was incomplete. Courts retained power to award insolvent debtors to creditors. Debt bondage continued under new names. The Publilius case was likely one of thousands. The law responded not to principle, but to excess. This pattern repeats. Reform comes only when the system threatens to collapse. Then creditors adapt, repackage, digitize. After the Civil War, freed slaves fell into debt peonage. Sharecropping trapped them through supply debts. Convict leasing arrested black Americans on pretextual charges, forcing them into debt bondage. Debt peonage was formally outlawed in 1867. It continued through the 1950s. The trap didn't disappear, it evolved. And they made sure you'd never see it coming. The 2008 mortgage crisis stripped $9.8 trillion in household wealth. Banks received $700 billion in bailouts. Homeowners received nothing. 10 million families lost their homes. The lender always wins. The citizen always serves. Rome's patricians held monopolistic control over lending. Roughly 5 to 10% controlled all credit, facing a debtor class of 90 to 95%. Appian described the result. The rich, absorbing poor neighbors' allotments partly by persuasion and partly by force, came to cultivate vast tracts instead of single estates. Debt created slave work plantations that destroyed the citizen farmer class. Most people still think debt is about money. It's about obedience. Between 494 and 287 BCE, Roman plebeians executed 5 secessions. They withdrew labor. They refused military service. Rome could neither function nor defend itself without them. These weren't protests. These were revolutions. The first secession created the tribune of the plebs, power to veto patrician actions. Some debts were forgiven, but the fundamental system remained intact. Later, reforms provided relief. Interest rate caps, debt repayment plans. The leges genuitiae abolished interest. Yet creditors refused to lend without interest. The prohibition became unenforceable. Creditor power exceeded legislative authority. The empire didn't fall. It rebranded. Rome's historians, Livy, Plutarch, Diodorus, blamed the republic's fall on creditor intransigence. By the 2nd century BCE, a quarter of the population lived in debt bondage. Near Eastern kingdoms practiced regular debt cancellations for 3 millennia. Egyptian pharaoh Bakenranef canceled debts during invasion. Soldiers' bodies should belong to the state, not creditors. Rome refused this wisdom. The result was economic polarization, military decline, and collapse. Modern financialization replicates Rome's fatal mistake. Student debt affects 45 million Americans owing $1.77 trillion. Black borrowers owe $4,000 to $7,000 more than white peers and face debt burdens 2 decades later, while white borrowers have paid theirs off. Payday lending strips $8 billion annually from struggling families. 75% of borrowers earn under $50,000. Indebted workers accept worse employment conditions, lower wages, longer hours. Debt obligations eliminate bargaining power. Knowledge is your protection. David Graeber asked whether an ancient Roman transported to modern America would see things differently. His answer: we no longer sell ourselves to employers, we rent ourselves. For anyone from the ancient world, such a distinction would be at best a legalism. The mechanisms match. The effects match. Loss of economic freedom. Political disempowerment. Multi-generational poverty. Systemic inequality. You're not learning about Rome. You're learning about the trap you're already in. Rome fell because it chose creditors over citizens. The empire never fell. It digitized. Every credit score is a ledger of obedience. Every loan contract is Nexum with better marketing. Every paycheck sent to debt service is tribute to patrician class that killed Roman reformers 2,000 years ago. History keeps offering the same lesson. We keep refusing to learn. And if you think debt was Rome's only scam, they figured out how to pay their soldiers nothing and convinced them it was an honor. That story's next. You should watch it now to see the full con.